Greetings, friends. You are on the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of March 12, 2025. A huge number of events have occurred today, so let's get started. For several days in a row, the most important and significant news has been coming from the Sudzha border area of the Kursk region. Before we begin, I would sincerely like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription helps support its growth. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. Early this morning, around 7 to 8 a.m., Russian sources began publishing footage from the central part of Sudzha, specifically from Soviet Square. The footage showed Russian soldiers raising the Russian tricolor on various structures, as well as banners of different units of the Russian armed forces that took part in combat operations in the Sudzha direction. These were the first images released this morning, including direct footage of Soviet Square itself. We can see 7 Russian fighters, and overall, the footage provides sufficient information to make a clear and definitive conclusion that by the morning of March 12, 2025, the Russian armed forces had established full control over Sudzha and expelled Ukrainian forces. At this stage of the battle in the Sudzha direction, it is crucial to understand the difference between the town of Sudzha and the Sudzha agglomeration. As for the town of Sudzha itself, even pro-Ukrainian sources confirmed today that Ukrainian forces have withdrawn from it. The town comprises all the buildings in the central part of this area and extends eastward. To the north and northwest of Sudzha, there is a small village or town called Zaoloshenka. To the west and southwest, there is another small settlement, Goncharovka. As of the time of this video's preparation, there was no confirmed information that Russian forces had entered these settlements. Currently, Russian army units are advancing on both villages. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces are attempting to retreat from this section of the front as quickly as possible toward the state border. If we try to forecast how the situation will develop, it is highly likely that by the end of March 12th, the Russian armed forces will have completely cleared Zaoloshenka. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense, along with the Sever North military group, confirmed in their latest report that Russian forces have taken full control of the settlements of Pervoy Knyaznoye and Vetoroye Knyaznoye. This indicates that Russian troops have entered Zaoloshenka from the north. Given the absence of natural barriers or defensive lines, it is likely that Ukrainian forces will abandon this settlement in the near future. Regarding Goncharovka, which is located in the southwesternmost part of the Sudzha agglomeration, it appears that the Ukrainian armed forces will still attempt to hold their positions there. However, we are likely talking not about days, but mere hours. This is where the last Ukrainian units will be retreating from. The area is separated from the main Sudzha agglomeration by a small water barrier, which acts as a natural obstacle that could slightly slow down the advance of Russian troops. However, once again, this is a matter of hours, not weeks or even days. Throughout the day, Ukrainian forces have been sending units to try to break through and support their retreating troops from Sudzha. Most of these attacks have been concentrated in the area between the settlements of Guev and Kurilovka. In this footage, we can see another counterattack by the Ukrainian armed forces, but it seems that their troops, likely from the Adar battalion, were unable to even land. This sector saw recent counterattacks by newly formed Idar units, but according to reports, they were completely defeated and destroyed. Of course, some Ukrainian units managed to escape from Sudzha. Different experts cite varying figures, but all agree that the overall loss rate for Ukrainian forces retreating from Sudzha was at least 70% of their personnel, a catastrophic loss. Even considering that 70% of the brigade was destroyed, we must understand that the remaining 30% likely consists of wounded soldiers or stragglers. Only a very small fraction of those who manage to escape will be able to return to combat anytime soon. At present, the Ukrainian army is trying to stabilize the front line using units from the 61st Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. They are attempting to hold the border, not only to maintain evacuation routes, but also to prevent the Russian army from advancing into Sumy Oblast. Their main goal is to ensure that Russian troops do not use the retreating Ukrainian forces as cover to enter the city of Sumy itself. Once again, the countdown has begun, and in the very near future, most likely by the end of this week, the Russian armed forces are expected to completely clear the Sudzha agglomeration. Regarding the villages located along the state border, these include Gogolevka, the settlement of Guevo, as well as Melovoy and the small village of Gornal. It is currently difficult to estimate specific timelines for when the Russian army might reach the state border in these areas. Although these territories are constitutionally part of the Russian Federation, it appears unlikely that Russian forces will reach them within the next week. There is still some distance from Sudzha, and it is here that Ukrainian forces are currently trying to entrench themselves. However, it is only a matter of time. In this case, we are no longer talking about hours, but possibly weeks. Let me remind you once again that in the battles for the Kursk region and the Sudzha border area, the Russian army has so far been operating only with the first wave of the offensive. Reserves have not yet been deployed. Indeed, the Russian army has the resources and reserves to continue advancing toward the settlements near Sumy and even to the regional center itself. So let's keep watching how events unfold. Now we move to the Kupyansk direction, from where many updates have also been coming in. While everyone was focused on the developments in Sudzha and the Sudzha district over the past few days, Russian forces managed to achieve significant success on other fronts as well. Here, we can see FPV drone strikes on frontline positions of the Russian army in the settlement of Boguslavka. Until recently, this entire sector was referred to as the Boguslavka direction, named after its final target, the small village of Boguslavka. However, today, we already have objective control footage confirming the presence of Russian troops in the village, indicating that the Russian army has completed a certain phase of its mission here. Now, all Russian units will be moving further toward the settlement of Borovaya. Next, we shift to the Chasiv Yar direction, where over the past 24 hours, some of the most significant and intriguing developments have taken place. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced in its latest report that Russian forces have established full control over the settlement of Novomarkovo. Pay close attention to how the map has changed. Until yesterday, frontline positions on most mapping services placed Russian forces near settlements like Grigorovka and Orekovo-Vasilevka. But today, based on the Ministry of Defense's report, we see a significant shift. Moreover, this is not just any village. Novomarkovo is located on the Ukrainian side of the Seversky Donets-Donbass Canal. And take note, this already falls within the Kramatorsk direction. The distance from Russian frontline positions in Novomarkovo to Kramatorsk airfield is now less than 15 kilometers, precisely 12.86 kilometers. This is a major breakthrough in Ukraine's defenses. There has been little prior analysis of this section of the front, and it is difficult to predict how the Russian side will capitalize on this sudden advantage. Where will Russian forces move next? They could advance toward Kramatorsk, splitting Ukrainian forces and potentially triggering another collapse similar to the Sudzha sector. Alternatively, this could be an operation to cover the flank of Russian units planning an offensive against Siversk from the southwest and west. It's hard to predict, but this is undoubtedly a significant and, in some ways, a stunning advance by Russian forces in the past 24 hours. However, let me emphasize once again, so far this information has only been confirmed by the Russian Ministry of Defense and select analysts. No objective control footage has yet emerged from this section of the front. Meanwhile, fighting continues in the settlement of Toretsk. Over the past day, the map has once again shifted in favor of the Ukrainian armed forces. Today, Russian sources published footage of FPV drone strikes targeting Ukrainian positions in the southwestern part of the Zabalk quarter. Based on this footage, adjustments were made to the map. Some areas that were considered contested territory yesterday have now been marked as controlled by the Ukrainian forces, including a small sector in the central part of the quarter. Fighting here remains intense, and for now, the Russian army has not been able to stabilize the situation in Zabalk. It is too early to assess the full consequences, but the situation remains highly challenging for Russian forces in this sector. Next, we move to the Vozdvizhenka direction. The Ukrainian side has carried out a series of counterattacks toward the farms south of the N32 road junction between Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka. Here, we see Ukrainian forces counterattacking, with a Ukrainian tank firing at close range at the frontline positions of the Russian armed forces. Based on this footage, we are now marking the road junction as controlled by the Ukrainian armed forces. Previously, the area north of the junction was considered contested. as various mapping sources indicated that the Ukrainian armed forces had managed to establish control over it. However, today, new objective control footage has physically confirmed this. Moving on to the southern Donetsk direction, there are also a significant number of important updates. Regarding the Bohatyr direction, no changes have been observed. Over the past day, after clearing Konstantinopel, Russian forces have regrouped. It is possible that an advance toward Razliv and Bohatyr will begin soon, pushing further west toward the Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions. In the Velika Novosilka direction, however, heavy clashes are ongoing. The Ukrainian army has deployed additional reserves and launched active counterattacks. According to pro-Ukrainian and neutral mapping services, Ukrainian forces managed to partially regain control over Novoselka in the past 24 hours. Currently, 50% of the village is considered under Ukrainian control, while the other 50% remains under Russian control. Additionally, according to various cartographic sources, Ukrainian forces have managed to push into the area between Privolny and Belatske. In the near future, Ukraine may attempt to build on this success and push Russian forces back toward the 05-10 road. These settlements are of strategic importance due to the open terrain and vast fields in this area. The Russian side must hold on to them at all costs to establish a strong foothold for further offensives. Without control over villages like Belatske, Privolny, and Novoselka, it will be extremely difficult to advance on this section of the front. At the same time, the Russian army continues to advance along the Mokra Yala River. Today, multiple sources, including the Russian Ministry of Defense and various reports linked to the Vostok Forces Group, confirmed that the settlement of Dnipro has come under firm Russian control. Just yesterday, these territories were still considered under Ukrainian control. It appears that the assaults and clearing operations in this settlement have now concluded. This means that on key fronts, following the fall of Sudzha and the Sudzha agglomeration, the Russian army is beginning to build rapid momentum. Meanwhile, numerous reports are coming in from various Ukrainian cities. Over the past 24 hours, Iskander missile strikes have been carried out on the city of Dnipro as well as on Kryvyi Rih. In these images, we can observe an Iskander strike on the Druzhba Hotel in Kryvyi Rih. Strikes on Dnipro were carried out using Geran-type drones. It appears that all these strikes targeted Ukrainian military headquarters and possibly groups of foreign instructors or mercenaries. Hotels are a known gathering place for Western specialists. This is a crucial week. I will reiterate that there is a high probability that by the end of the week, Russia may accept a proposal from Western countries for a 30-day ceasefire. However, we must clearly understand that during these 30 days, both the Ukrainian and Russian armed forces will be undergoing extensive regrouping. Ukraine will likely receive significant military reinforcements, while Russia may quietly redeploy and reposition its forces. If the ceasefire breaks down, the fighting will resume with even greater intensity. But we must also understand that if this ceasefire is established, regardless of who ultimately violates it, the next phase of the conflict will no longer be a direct war between Russia and Ukraine, but rather a confrontation between Russia and a massive coalition of Western nations that will fully stand behind Ukraine. Regardless of who is blamed for breaking the ceasefire, the accusations will be directed at Russia. European nations will place full responsibility on Moscow, and the response from Western countries may not be limited to mere diplomatic condemnation. That concludes today's updates. Thank you for staying with us. That's all for now.